Okay, we are videoing. Okay, like I said, we are past the halfway point now. The next at least 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, we'll be focusing on the other large impact on Christian worldview. The first one being basically the influence that has been presented to our kids, K through 12, and over the course of the last 50 to 75 years, how that has affected the ability and the comfort level for people today to have a strong biblical worldview. All right, now we're going to sections 5 through 8, and we're coming down. The local community, by the way, was where we focused on the education. So we looked at God and the family, how you relate to God, how your family relates to them, and how that influences your worldview. On the local community, there are several questions in the test about it, but I chose to use education as the focus point for local community. And now we're into the extended community and the common defense unit. Basically, this is the things that we have to deal with when we interface with society. What sorts of things, when we're growing up and working and living in society, how does that affect our ability to gain and then to keep a strong biblical worldview? That's where we're at tonight, and we're now dealing fully in the public. All right, there's our worldviews. The strong biblical. Remember, we're shooting for the left-hand side. Most of the folks in the churches are at least in the moderate biblical worldview, and then most of the folks that are not considered Christians tend to fall in the secular worldview. And then, of course, we got other unusual groups that fall anything to the socialist, communist, atheist, agnostic, whatever. And what we're dealing with now in terms of the societal input is society is basically saying the society has evolved to the point where they're saying the Constitution is no longer relevant. We must adapt and switch over to case law. Can you think of any examples happening kind of recently where maybe the Constitution is no longer relevant? I mean, I just was watching news less than an hour ago, and they were reading the platform for the DSA, the Democrats. So I can't even believe it. What they're saying is we have to eliminate the Senate, eliminate the presidency and the judicial, have more people in the House, Congress of the House, and have them decide who the president should be, and them decide who should be on the courts on a rotating basis. Does that fit the Constitution? I mean, it like rips into shreds. So we are definitely heading towards a society where at least a vocal minority thinks that the Constitution is no longer relative. We must adapt. Switching over to case law. Anyone involved with it? Case law is?
So, this draws a contrast between the United States and in other countries, most notably Great Britain comes to mind as one of our forefathers, if you will. Great Britain has a common law tradition.
Yeah.
And what that means is they view the law as ever evolving, ever changing, adapting to society's mores and values.
Yep.
Throughout the ages. What makes us different is we have, first of all, a written constitution.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Which is quite unusual, and one that was, oh, by the way, popularly endorsed. The people endorsed the Constitution.
We the people. I heard that
right.
Somewhere before.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And we have a very rigorous process, intentionally so, to change the Constitution through the amendment process. And that's important because a Constitution that is stable, that is not easily changed or adapted, provides stability, provides predictability, and in our particular case, it is a reflection of traditional American values,
Right.
and that's incredibly important.
So when someone steps up to me and say, "You're going to destroy democracy. You're going to ruin democracy in this country," I usually, if they calm down enough to listen, I usually say, "We don't have a democracy. We have a constitutionally based republic with democratically elected representatives. Constitutionally based. What does that mean? That means there is a written set of rules that we shall follow that is very difficult to change. You need a lot more than 51 to change it. Republic means we're based on laws. It's not a question about the majority wants to do, it's what the law says we must do. And the decision of that is made by representatives who we then democratically elect. Okay? The only democracy in there is how we elect the representatives. And even that, I think in the state of Maine just now, they just decided we're going to change that around a little bit. I think a recent president was skipped out and over 14 million votes, and he didn't run. But anyway, so our democracy being destroyed is only one small fraction of the whole thing. Constitutional republic. A pure democracy is what you have when two wolves and a lamb get together and decide what's for lunch. 51% is the winner, and it can change tomorrow. So basically, we're in a constitutional republic, and that constitution and the laws empower the majority and protect the minority. Anyway, that's my soapbox. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to say, hey, the basics haven't changed. God grants rights and man's laws and must comply with Lonang. We've seen that Lonang again. What that means is the rights that we have been enumerated, put down on paper, signed by a majority of the folks, said this is what we're going to do, fought a war over it, then wrote a constitution based on it. We've got a lot of history behind us that says we want to follow laws that God grants. God grants, not each other, not Joe down the road, but God. So we need to really push back with that. And when we get pushback from the pushback, we need to go back to Lonang, back to the Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and nature's God. And we'll look at that. All right. So are we a nation of rights and laws or permissions and precedences? Let's look at this. Natural rights. A natural right is given by the owner. We are founded as a country based upon Christian principles. Not the Bible per se, not some church's constitution, but the very basic principles of Christianity is what's woven right into our government from the very beginning. And the rights can only be given by the owner. And who owns those rights? God does. God's rights are inviolate and unalienable. There's not a one of us amongst us that can deny the rights of God forever. I mean, there's somebody that can deny your life or take over a country and run it like a dictator for a while. But in the long run, God's rights are God's rights. And if you're gonna get rid of God's rights, you pretty much have to do it at the end of a gun.
Brother Scott, to your point, one of the things that made the American Constitution truly revolutionary was the fact that it recognized man's rights as emanating from God. Not a monarchy, not
Right.
a ruling elite, an oligarchy,
Yeah.
but from God Himself. And that truly was revolutionary. Of course, since then, many nations have to varying degrees attempted to adopt those principles. But that's what is the United States an exceptional nation? That's one of the things that makes the United States an exceptional nation.
Probably the other nation that is most successfully basing their entire concept, their life on God, is the Muslims. A different God. I mean, I have read the Quran from cover to cover. That was difficult. But that is their constitution, and they're willing to die for it. Even if it proves to be not true, they're willing to die for it. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to talk more about that. God owns them. And the right holder can forfeit. What this means is that if you're given a right and you choose not to use it in a natural right, you have the right to refuse the right. Right? On the other side, we have permissions or vested rights. On the natural side, the rights are given by the owner. On the permission side, the title must first be obtained. We've got to make that king a king before he can give you some rights. We've got to make that dictator a dictator or allow him to become a dictator before he can tell you what you're going to do. The title to give those rights must be first obtained, and then right is granted by the title holder. Okay, whereas we're focusing on a chain of command through the government, and the government being responsible to God ultimately. So the execution of those rights kind of a chain on up, but granted by the title holder. If the title holder is not the president, it's not the judiciary, it's not the Congress and the Senate. The title holder is God. Vested rights tend to be earned, purchased, borrowed, or gifted. That you have to actually earn the rights or gifted the rights, or somehow you've got to do something to get the right. Do we have the right under God to enjoy eternity? If we accept it, we do. We have the right to refuse it. But basically, accepting Jesus is getting that right. Christianity is the only religion. All other religions is do this, do that, do this, do that. Christianity is done. It's done. All you gotta do is take it. It's done. You have to get it, earn it or purchase it. It's done. And the title holder can revoke it. So a right given by a vested right can be taken away by the title holder. And God has said, go for it. There it is. All right. So under natural rights, self-government, self-defense, own development, disposal of property, personal choice, free conscience, choose profession, choose mate, reproduce, assembly, petition, speech, fruits of labor, contrive an event, privacy, free association, contract. These are all considered natural rights. I mean, it's not just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have certainly inalienable rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there are a lot of rights that we're given from God. We can enjoy all of these, again, if we have a government that is doing God's bidding, the way God defined government. Under the vested right side, you have to go get a license to drive, hunt, and fish. You have to contribute to retirement fund earnings. You have to pay taxes, Social Security, Medicare, health care, social support programs. All of these things have to be earned or bought or purchased or somehow obtained. Jesus has already done all this for us. We just have to accept it. The principles behind that are extraordinarily basic, and yet we are literally the first country in the history of the earth to actually pull it off and keep it for 250 years. Really shocking, I think, old Ben. Thank you if you can keep it. So anyway, all right. So laws or precedents? Are we into laws or precedents? All right, from a biblical point of view, what's a law? Primarily, our laws are based upon Lonang, the laws of nature and nature's God. That is the basic. If you drill down and say why, the kids 7 times I ask you why, you should get down to, at the bottom, God somewhere. I mean, everything we do, think, touch, feel, live, all our activities are based upon God's laws. Now, some laws are like regular laws. You shall behave this way or that way. But God's laws are all the way down to the molecular level. I mean, all the way down to atoms, how they behave. It's unbelievable the amount of laws that we deal with scientifically and can be depended on. We've been doing science now for 1,000 years, and the laws that we use to basically decide and design experiments and do things, they haven't changed. Gravity hasn't changed. If I drop that 1,000 times, it's going to fall. Gravity is not going to go, that's it, I've had it. Next time you let it go, it's going up. Gravity, it doesn't change. And there's 2 or 3 places in the Bible that says God doesn't change. He is what he is, uniformitarianism. All right, we are in a republic, not a democracy. So there's laws in both places. But in the republic, it's written down, you follow it. In a democracy, you take a vote and do it. Right? Laws are compatible with learning, and they're by the consent of the governed. This is one of the things that made this Constitution actually just totally different. They actually said by the consent of the governed, not the guy with the biggest stick or the most population, but the consent of the governed. And of course, for constitutional law, that means we're based upon a difficult to change standard set of laws. In the secular world, you basically deal with precedents. Case law is just exactly what it says. It's laws that are decided case by case by case. And every time some other dispute ends up in the courts, whatever that judge or group of judges decide is appropriate for this case, that becomes the new law, and that becomes precedent, and so it sets the next one, and that's what they have in Great Britain. All right, they don't have a Congress and a Parliament, or Congress and a president. They have a Parliament that basically picks the president, the premier, and their laws are whatever the last judge said. Okay, so, judges can evolve rulings based upon an evolving culture. And again, England's a great example. If you look at the laws that govern the person's life, back during the early days of parliamentarianism, and today, it's evolving. It's evolving. We have evolved also. We've evolved 27 times, called amendments. But those evolutions were not easy. Yeah.
Well, Scott, this is another area where you see this tension between a biblical worldview and a secular worldview playing out in our society. That those who are not happy with the rate of change that is occurring in our society will talk about packing the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So, in other words, changing the number of justices that we have on the Supreme Court, because in their view, we've got too many people abide by the Constitution.
Right.
We need to water their votes down by adding a few more who have a secular view, who will look at the law in terms of as you said, case by case basis, evolving morals and values, as opposed to going back to the standard.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. All right. Those are the written laws. What about some of the unwritten laws? When I'm talking about worldviews to Christians and non-Christians, quite often the conversation will go to not laws written down in the book, but laws that are unwritten laws. And when you really start the discussion, you find out what they're doing is they're talking about morals. What is morality? And I'm just going to take a little side jaunt down a rabbit hole, and let's cover what morality is, so we can keep it separate from laws and precedents. All right, let's start with you or y'all. All right, so we got a box in the middle here. By the way, when I moved down here, I found out that y'all was not plural. It's all y'all.
Right.
Give me a break. All right, anyway. And I also love the stacking of adjectives. We should have, could have, would have, had already done that. Anyway, that's another sub rabbit hole. All right, so on the right-hand side, we have deontological ethics. I always like to throw at least 1 or 2 good words out there. Deontological ethics are ethics that are based upon your opinion of what is right and wrong. So if your standards come from yourself and you apply those standards to your decisions and try to apply them to everybody else, then you are a deontological person. We are not totally deontological, and neither is Christianity, because who was the one that in the Old Testament, lowered him down out of the castle on the rope, and anyway, or Ruth, When there are a couple of different things, well, yeah, technically, well, here's an example, and they use this once in a while. If you were in 1939 Germany and, you know, you hear a knock, open the door, you have any Jews in here? All right, maybe you got a family of Jews up in the attic. Do you follow your deontological law that says you don't lie? Or do you lie to save their lives? White lies. So it's not purely deontological, but that is the tendency on the horizontal lever of what you do. That's the you. Let's look at the y'all. On the y'all side, there's sociology. And let me tell you, sociologically, as you go around the world today, there's an awful lot of different groups of basic rights and wrongs that are very different. I cannot believe the intelligent, multi-degreed folks that are out on the streets demanding the rights for homosexuality from Islamic countries. If you go to Arabia and you're into the sex thing, they throw you off a roof. Okay, so anyway, but sociology will determine you want to fit into a group. So where does your right and wrong come from? Probably some deontological, but probably a lot from society. You end up doing what society expects you to do, accepting what's right and wrong by their definitions, because you got to live here. All right? That's not us. We shouldn't be doing that. A strong biblical worldview was not going to do that because of that axis. Morality is established by God. We said God gives us the rights. God also sets the standard. Deontological, you're the standard. And you have some flexibility. Sociological, society is the standard. Or if there is a standard, it might be the Tuesday and Thursday standard. I've seen crazier things. But the horizontal, the you all on the horizontal, the way we work with everybody else and interface with the rest of the world, that's not the standard. The standard is God. And the right and the wrong is defined by God. And the package of those rights and wrongs is how we define morality. A lot of the folks down on the horizontal want to say that they have morality, but really they have their own morality. Their God, which they worship, appears every morning in the mirror. We'll get into that in a minute. So, difference between laws and morals. Now, if the universe is all there is, time, space, material, and laws, if the entire universe, everything in the universe is time, space, material, and by material I lump in energy. So those four things completely covers everything, and laws, God's laws. Okay, laws like gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces. Those are the four basic laws. Laws of logic, so things that laws of cause and effect. All of these things which are characteristic of God, the entity. If that's all there is, then what are we? What are our opinions? What are our standards? If all there is time, space, material, you cannot accept the fact that there even is a God. Because you have to step outside of time, space, material to find God. When you're living in nature, God is super nature, supernatural. Okay? What are we? Well, what are we? You are what you eat. Is that what you are? You know what you eat? I know I'm mostly what I eat. I'm gravitationally gifted. You are what you think. How does thinking work? For most of us, and I have to admit, probably all of us, our thinking tends to be deontological first. Okay? If we are just TSM, if all we are time, space, material, then we are nothing more than a moist robot, a molecular machine we don't even have conscious thought. What do I mean by that? Moist robot, molecular machine. If literally the laws of nature, which controls everything down to chemical interactions, physical things and photons and electrons and so forth and so on, if all of this is being controlled by laws, not by us, then we're just a molecular machine. What makes us better than a molecular machine is the fact that we have conscious thought. And in that conscience, and I've got another 2 or 3 lectures in another course about consciousness and human exceptionalism. Conscious thought is when you're starting to get stuff outside of TSM into your brain. That's like a painting that's never existed, a song that's never been written before, a story that's never been told. Creative things like that are elements of consciousness. Just the idea that we're worried about, we feel the need for a creator outside the universe. I've heard it said so many times, if God didn't exist, well, then we'd invent him. Because there's so many things that we can explain. It's outside of DSM. So that's what we are. Well, if that's what we are, then what is right and wrong? If we're just a molecular machine, what is right and wrong? Jump in here anytime. All right. If we don't know what's right and wrong, then what's the difference between Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa? I mean, I think we can figure a couple of things that are different. But what it boils down to is if there's no God, there's no standard. If everything we do is done deontologically or sociologically, then basically rights and wrongs are your opinion. Right and wrong is now your opinion. And chances are your opinion is not going to be well received by someone else who has a different opinion. And if you put 10 people in a room together, there's going to be 12 opinions. Okay? So the difference between Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa, an awful lot of people will tell me, I'm going to heaven because I'm better than him. I think I quoted a statistic back about 4 or 5 weeks ago. The study that was done almost 2 decades ago now, back when Clinton was president, are you going to heaven? And like 70% said Bill Clinton was going. 75% said, what's that, Jordan, basketball guy? He's going to heaven. Mother Teresa, like 80%. But you know who got the highest score? Themselves, 87. 87. 7% of people above and beyond Mother Teresa figured, I'm better than him, her. All right, so opinions versus standards. Characteristics of God. I've mentioned this before, I'll do it again. The things that are the rights that are issued by God, given by God, the laws that allow the universe, the time, space, and material to be maintained over time, okay? Those things about God are literally characteristics of God. And I use the love and the justice quite a lot to explain to people why we have Jesus, because of those 2 characteristics. That's why Jesus exists. The characteristic of love, God is love. It's not God likes love, or God can love, or God did love, or God didn't have the chance to love until Jesus showed up. Now he's got something else we can love. God is love. It's hard to imagine a entity outside of TSM whose characteristics literally are the things that we now set as standards. God is infinitely loving and infinitely just. And because we have sinned, the only way you can get those 2 things squared up with one another is himself had to pay the price. You get a ticket driving 60 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. You go into court. The judge says, I'm feeling good today. I'll let you off the hook. He just forgave you of something. But really, was he authorized to forgive? Suppose you had a $100 fine behind that, and he said you don't have to pay it. Did he have the authority to do that? Well, he's probably granted authority, but where did he get it from? He just took $100 away from the budget of the state or city or the whatever, okay? When God forgives your sins, He owns it all. And he says he wants everybody to get to heaven. Infinitely loving. But he's also infinitely just. Which means if we get what we deserve, we're sinners, we ain't going. So the only way to do it is he has to be the traffic judge. And he has to pay the debt. And does he own the debt? Yeah, he owns the debt. It's called his son. That's the price of the debt that he paid so that we can be loved and justly or unjustly be graced in. But another rabbit hole. All right. All right. Is anything evil then? What's evil? There was a very famous philosopher that said, God created everything. Evil exists. God created evil. God created evil? What's evil? All right.
There's a lot of different opinions.
Yes, there are. I'll give you one of them. Evil. Well, how about shadows and rust? There's two examples there. Shadows. If I take away light, does shadows go away? Yeah. Okay. So a shadow, can I have a shadow in a room with no light? No. Shadow is evidence of the light. And when you lose the light, shadows are indefined. All right. Shadow is a lack of light. Rust. I went to college upstate New York. Every car in upstate New York, the lower 6 inches were all rusted away because of snow and ice and salt. Okay. That car was, but if I take away all the rust, I've got a nice car. But if I take away all the car, how much rust do I have? A nice car is the absence of rust. All right, so that two big hints. What's evil? The absence of God. Evil is nothing more than the absence of God. All right, so if evil exists, then standard exists, then God exists. And this is one of the things you can use to help people understand that God exists. All you have to do is find an example that everybody agrees is right or wrong. Throwing babies off a cliff just so you can hear them go thump at the bottom. Is that right or wrong? I can't think of any society that does that out of recreation, just because they like throwing babies off a cliff. If everybody feels the same way about something and we have no other relationship one to another, we didn't grow up together in the same society, learn the same stuff, but if we all have the same basic right and wrong sense about things, that's called the standard. And the only standard that covers everybody everywhere all the time is God's standard. So much so that, again, if God didn't exist in the minds of some people, they would feel forced to create him to explain standards. All right. And Romans 1:8 thinks that God's standard is literally written on our hearts. Okay. So the Bible supports the fact that God's standard. All right. Can an atheist be a moral person? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. Sure. I mean, atheists can follow the rules really good. Okay. I mean, they can follow God's rules too. They just don't think God's given them, but they like the rules. They are deontologically happy with God's rules and they're following them. And they can be a very moral person. Can he note the standard? Can he live according to the standard? Yeah. He can know it epistemologically. Well, I think that's the next slide, right? Oh, can he validate and justify the standard? I'm jumping ahead of myself. Epistemology and ontology. You've even used this a couple of times. Epistemology is a fancy Greek word for how you learn what you know, how you learned what you know. Ontology is what you know. Okay? So when you touch a red hot stove and burn your finger, that's how you learned not to touch a red hot stove. A red hot stove is ontological. Touching it is epistemological. And when you say what we should or shouldn't do, people will give you a lot of things about society says it does this, and that's epistemological. The question is, Can an atheist validate his agreement to follow standards, but he can't justify the standard? Where does the standard come from? It comes from God. An atheist cannot justify the standard. He cannot do it ontologically, but he will certainly sit there and tell you, well, I follow this standard because my mother said so, my father said so, the kids at school did it, my society. Those are all epistemological, not ontological. And again, God is ontological. That's what drives ontology. All right, so no, the validation is outside DSM. Ooh, about to be gravitationally gifted again. Um, they can't validate their belief system, which is coming from something outside of TSM, if there is nothing outside of TSM. Okay, all right. So that's enough of the. That's just a background, because morality usually comes up in any discussion about right and wrong from a social or a growing up basis. Most everybody, when they're talking about right and wrong, are going to talk to you about, well, I learned this growing up, my parents did this growing up, society says this, I traveled there, and I've learned not to do this, that, and there, because otherwise I'll get arrested. Okay, these are all epistemological. What we're looking for is, what is the ontological definition of right and wrong and right? And when they're allowed to think about it, they realize that the ontological standard is God, outside of TSM. All right, so that was a little rabbit hole. All right, now I'm going to go a different direction. The founding of this country is, as John said, is literally, it's unique. It is completely, totally unique in all the history of the earth. And it's characteristics that nobody else has been able to duplicate. Some have tried parts and pieces, but they just can't pull it off. And we basically have pulled it off. Why? Because it was built upon Christian principles. Back to John Locke and all the other people that came together, that trained the people that end up training our forefathers, our founding fathers, and the logic that they used, which we'll hear about in the video next week, is all basic Christian principles. So if you're interested in learning more about it, I'm going to use four. This book right here is called The 5,000 Year Leap. Okay, and there you go, $15.60 for the 5,000 Year Leap. Basically, what it says is, approximately 5,000 years from the beginning, God decided, I'm going to help these folks make a country. And here are the 28 Christian, no, not all of them are Christian based. Some of them are just common sense based. Basically, there's 28 principles upon which this country was founded. Almost all of them are Christian principles, literally. All of them lean on Christian principles, and I'm going to pick just four of them. If you're interested in how this country was formed, how this country is a Christian nation because founded on Christian principles, then I recommend the book. If you're not sure you want to spend $15.60, but you want to look at it, you're welcome to borrow mine, take it home, review it. If you like it, write a check for $15.60. I'll leave this here. First one who wants to borrow it, go for it. All right, so now we're talking about the 5,000 year leap. All right, biblical basis of American jurisprudence and governance. All right, so these are the 28 of the 28 principles in this book. First principle, we're going to look at four of the 28 principles. First principle, the only reliable basis for sound government and just human relations is natural law. We literally can open up the Declaration of Independence and read that. I mean, that is the founding document. That is the document that summarized the thinking of 56 folks back in 1760s, whatever, late 60s, early 70s, that started this whole process. This is where they came from. You love God and you love your neighbor. Matthew 22:36-40, Deuteronomy 6:4-5, and Leviticus 19:18. You love God, you love your neighbor. That's the bottom line. That's the law. When they asked Jesus, what's the most important uh, uh, rule? You love your God, and then you love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that's it. Number one, right at the top of the list. Love God, love your neighbor. Um, eternal, and oops, missing the D. Eternal and universal. The concepts, the characteristics of God, by our definition, are eternal. Now, one of the interesting concepts I try to explain to people, I'm not touching it now, is what is time? We are bound by a time that just kind of moves forward. We know what was, we know exactly what is, we have no idea what's coming. We call that type A time. God, and outside of the TSM, lives in type B time, right, which is non-tensed. It doesn't have past, present, future. It literally has everything available, past, present, future. And if God wants to see what's going to happen 3 weeks Tuesday, he can go to that bucket and say it's right there. What happened last week, you can go to this bucket and do that. So literally, I use the example of a card catalog. You just go to the card, pull it out, and that's what you need to know. All right? So God's living in type B time. What that means is it is eternal. Why is it eternal? Because God is eternal by definition. Did time exist before our universe was created? Type B did, but type A didn't exist. There was no thing that kind of clicked along, right? And when in the tail end of this thing, God wipes out the whole thing, type A time comes to an end. Type B time is still out there, and that's the time we're going to be living in. That's one of the things that bother a lot of people when they say the debate between when you die, are you sleeping or are you awake? Okay, that's always an interesting conversation to have. And for those of us who are awake, how do you explain the fact that the end hasn't come yet, but if you peek out there at the card catalog, at the buckets, you can think, did I make it or not? Yeah. But now you're in a time that isn't going forward because both what is and what will be is. That sounds a little Clintonish, but anyway. All right. Basis for all loaning. So, principle, reliable basis for sound government, all loaning. So we can just take it literally. If we study and understand loaning, laws of nature and nature's God, we have what we need to build a government. All mankind can be taught God's law. Now, all sentient mankind can be taught God's law. Yeah, I know there's going to be some people can't be taught anything, but generically speaking, yeah, God's law, the Bible, has spread into how many languages now? It's a big number. It's not just Koine Greek and Hebrew and English. There, God's law is literally out to anybody that wants to find it. And as Romans says, even if you don't have a Bible in front of you, look around. You can see God's creation. Which, if you think about it, you're learning about God. And all other laws must be measured against that. So that is first principle. Has any of this changed today? Yeah, this is the principle that founded us back in 1760s, early 1770s. Has any of this changed today? Can I legitimately, go on CNN and say, "Oh, this doesn't apply anymore"? Don't have to worry about it. Are we a Christian nation or not? Well, I can't argue that, but we're founded on Christian principles, and the principles ain't changed yet. Okay? Let's look at fourth principle. Without religion, the government of free people cannot be maintained. The schools must teach religion, morality, and knowledge. By the way, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 actually made that a law in the States. Uh, uh, the original laws that, quote, pushed teaching were quite up there. So you got to teach religion, morality, as well as knowledge. I've got another slide that shows how long that stayed on, but Teaching is restricted to the universal fundamentals. There exists a creator, and mankind should recognize and worship him. He revealed a moral code which distinguishes right from wrong. That's the standard again. He holds us responsible for the way we treat each other. Love your God and love your neighbor. All mankind lives beyond this life. That's important. If there's nothing beyond this life, we're all wasting our time here tonight. And in the next life, we are judged by our conduct in this one. Anything changed? Any of those no longer applicable today? Two more. Let's look at the eighth principle. Men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. There's three great natural rights that come directly out of common law, English common law. This is the Locke principle out of common law. You have a right to personal security, and that's life. And that is the most important. When you lose that one, you're finished, you're done. Okay, at least on earth, you're done and finished. So life is, in fact, the single most earthly important right, life. No one's supposed to take that from you. And it doesn't say location, location, location either. It doesn't talk about a 6-inch birth canal, but that's another whole topic, okay? You have a right to life. What you're defining then is, where does life start? Personal liberty. I have the right to decide what I want to do. I can disagree with you, even if it costs me my life. I can disagree with you. I have the liberty to make my own decisions, and you can't take that away from me. Private property. Originally, when they were doing the Declaration, Jefferson had written private property, because private property is right out of English case law. And there was a lot of debate and go back and forth, and they changed it to pursuit of happiness. Well, yeah, maybe it's not exactly the same, but for the most part, most of us get happy by pursuing property. Okay, okay, give me more, more, more. Okay, until we learn that happiness really comes from above, and then we are pursuing happiness, not necessarily property. And no human organization has the right to destroy or abridge that. Let me ask the question for the third time. Is any of that changed? We're still living under those things, aren't we? I think so. All right, number 9. To protect man's rights, God has revealed certain principles of divine law. God's law is supreme. Man's laws must not contradict. Unalienable rights come with unalienable duties. We have to honor the Creator, not to steal, kill, lie, covet. Children to honor and obey parents. Parents to protect, teach, feed, clothe, and shelter children. Honorably perform contracts and covenants. Help the sick, crippled, injured, and poverty-stricken become self-sufficient and fulfill civic responsibilities. Follow the rules of moral rectitude. You know there's at least 1 and probably 4 or 5 Bible verses between each one of those. I mean, I didn't put it on there, but I would not have much to do. I could get onto ChatGPT or Claude right now and ask, what are the verses that support this? And in seconds, I'd have a printout. Okay, this is all right out of the Bible. The rights and the duties. Okay, the rights and the duties. So, anything change? Those are 4 of the principles. There's 24 more principles in that book, which if you're into that, I strongly suggest you read. 28 principles. And they're all, I can ask the same question about all of them. The principles that the place was built on haven't changed. Unfortunately, today there's a lot of people that don't like them and want them to change, evolve, let's get some new case law. But if you honestly evaluate it, even the people that don't like it, the principles haven't changed. I got 4 minutes. How far can I go in 4 minutes? Let's start the questions and see how far we get. Any comments so far? I didn't intend this to go as long. One too many rabbit holes. All right. First question. Legislating morality is a violation of the separation of church and state. Legislating morality, that's an interesting question. Legislating morality is a violation of the separation of church and state. What do you think? We merely do one question tonight. All right, let me go ahead and cheat a little bit and give you the answer. Ethics versus morality. All legislation is about morality. The question is, who is morality? You can't possibly separate church and state based on morality because everybody is making decisions and pushing laws and voting on things based on amorality. The question really is, who is morality? Yours, mine, his? So I disagree. You got to take morality into account when you're talking about morality, the creation of laws and so forth, the stately functions. All right, all right, the wording separation of church and state is found in the U.S. Constitution, and the separation of church and state must be enforced, prohibiting the acknowledgement of God in the public schools, governmental buildings, meetings, and property. So, is the wording separation of church and state found in the Constitution?
No.
Where is it?
In a letter that Jefferson wrote to, I believe, an Anabaptist
The Baptist
church.
congregation. Yeah.
But it's also misquoted and misapplied.
Yep.
The idea of separation of church and state is the idea that the United States government in the United States cannot endorse a particular faith, a particular religion. Again, a contrast with Great Britain at the time, who had the Church of England, was a state-sponsored church. And our founding fathers, rightfully so, did not want to be like Great Britain in that regard. They did not want to have a specific denominational faith that was not just supported by the state, but dictated by the state.
So you're basically getting to the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment. They call this the Establishment Clause. I wonder why. Establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. There's the First Amendment. All right? Government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That is a one-way no-no. The Constitution says what the government can do. It doesn't say what you're allowed to do, or the states. It tells what the government can do. And the government can't do that. The government can't do that. All right, I'm a minute over here. All right, so back when this country was formed, back when the 13 colonies were originally established, these were the established religions in the colonies. We had Anglicans, Congregationalists, Unitarians, Presbyterians, Baptists, Quakers, Catholics, and Jews. And all of these religions, in some way, form, or fashion, were either recognized or accepted or built upon by the colonies. All right, this chart will blow you away. These are the states, these are the colonies, the 13 colonies that had laws on the books that basically said, if you're living here, you better be one of these folks, okay? Virginia, for 224 years, 1606 to 1830, right, 1830, they had on their books that you got to be a Christian. And if you weren't, there were some rights you didn't have. New York, 225 years. Massachusetts, 204 years. You notice these things are ending up, what is it? I'm having a hard time reading this. Ending up 1830, 1846, 1833, 1867, 1792. Well, I guess Delaware got on the stick quickly. 1818, 1877, 1842, 1798. Look at North Carolina, 1875, 68, 44. The government, when did the Constitution get written? 1789 is when it was finally signed off on. Okay. So let's give it the date of 1789. In 1789, that First Amendment went into effect. Okay. How many of our colonies agreed to it and followed it? 3. Just 3. But they all seem to have been finishing up sometime around 1860. I wonder why. Why 1860? Actually, 1862. That's when the 14th Amendment was written. In the Civil War, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. 14th Amendment, the due process law. Literally, the Constitution of the United States only enforces a no religions one way, because these 13 colonies didn't change the way they were doing business until the 14th Amendment forced them. So there's the answer to that question. Strongly disagree, strongly disagree. And I ran 3 minutes over. We'll see you. Guest speaker next week. Guest speaker. Yeah. It's what?
I watched the 7:30 is what he's saying. So
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Hey, I've been off for years, okay? Thank you much. See you next week.
Thank you.